Be prepared, because something is happening right now, and most people will miss it completely. Not because it's small, not because it's subtle, but because it's uncomfortable. And the human mind has a habit of looking away from the very thing that could change everything. Today, April 15th, 2026, you are standing in the middle of a collision. A collision between who you are becoming and everything that refuses to let you become it. And I need you to understand this before we go any further. This feeling you've been carrying lately, this tension in your chest, this strange pressure like something inside you is trying to break free. That's not random. That's not stress. That's not you overthinking. There's a reason this is happening. And in a moment, I'll explain exactly what that reason is. But first, you need to recognize the battlefield. Because this isn't happening outside of you. It's happening inside. For the past few days, maybe even weeks, something has felt off. Not in a loud, chaotic way, but in a quiet, persistent, almost suffocating way. Like you're outgrowing something. But it's still wrapped around you. Like you've seen a version of your future. But your present reality refuses to catch up. You wake up with ambition, but something pulls you back. You think bigger, but then doubt creeps in like a shadow you can't shake. And the worst part? You can't fully explain it. You just feel it. That invisible resistance. That internal friction. That silent war between. The version of you that knows you're meant for more. And the version of you that's still tied to who you used to be. And here's the truth most people will never admit. This is the moment where people lose themselves. Not because they fail, but because they retreat. Because becoming who you're meant to be requires you to destroy who you've been. And that's where today comes in. Today, the sun in Aries, raw identity, action, courage, forms a direct square with Pluto in Capricorn. Power, control, fear, the past, the system that built you. This is not a gentle alignment. This is pressure. This is confrontation. This is the universe forcing a question you can't ignore anymore. Are you ready to outgrow the version of yourself that kept you safe, but small? Now here's where it gets intense. Because this isn't just about motivation. This isn't just about leveling up. This is about power. And most people don't understand what power actually is. They think power is confidence, or success, or money. But real power is the ability to walk away from the identity that once protected you. And that's exactly what's being challenged right now. Pluto in Capricorn doesn't just represent authority in the world, it represents the authority inside you. The voice that says, stay where it's safe, don't risk too much, don't change too fast, who do you think you are? And for years, that voice has been running your life, quietly, subtly, convincingly. But Aries doesn't negotiate. Aries doesn't ask for permission. Aries moves. So when the sun, your identity, moves through Aries and collides with Pluto, something happens. Something most people aren't prepared for. You start to see the truth, not the comfortable truth, the real one. You start realizing that version of you you've been holding on to is outdated. That environment you keep tolerating is limiting you. That fear you keep listening to is lying to you. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's why this feels so intense. Because clarity isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's violent. And here's the part nobody tells you. When you begin to evolve, the old version of you doesn't just disappear. It fights back. It whispers things like, this is too much. You're not ready. You're going to mess this up. Just go back to what's comfortable. And if you're not aware, you'll think that voice is you. But it's not. It's your past trying to survive. And today, that past is under pressure. This sun-Pluto square is exposing something very specific in your life. Something you've been avoiding. Something you've been tolerating. Something you've been negotiating with, even though deep down you know it has to change. And I want you to pay attention here, because this part matters more than anything. The discomfort you feel right now is not a sign that you're breaking. It's a sign that you're separating from old beliefs, old fears, old identities, old limitations. But separation feels like loss, even when it's growth. That's why this moment is dangerous, because if you misinterpret the feeling, you'll go backwards instead of forward. And that's exactly what most people will do today. They'll feel the pressure, and they'll escape it. Distractions, comfort, old habits, old patterns, old identities. But you're still here. You're still listening, which means something inside you already knows this moment matters. Now let's go deeper, because this isn't just about what's leaving, it's about what's trying to emerge. There is a version of you that you've already felt, maybe briefly, maybe in flashes, maybe in moments where everything just clicked. A version of you that is more decisive, more focused, more fearless, more aligned. But here's the problem. You can't become that version while still obeying the rules of your past. And that's the real conflict. It's not external, it's internal. You're trying to move forward while still asking permission from the version of you that was built to survive, not to thrive. And today, that contradiction breaks. The sun pushes forward, Pluto pulls back, and you feel it as pressure, as tension, as internal chaos. But what's actually happening is a decision that doesn't happen in words, it happens in identity. Who are you going to be now? Not tomorrow, not next month, now. Because moments like this don't wait, they don't linger, they don't repeat in the same way. This is a window, a narrow one, and what you choose inside this window shapes everything that comes next. But here's the part most people won't understand. You don't need to figure everything out today. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need certainty. You need one thing: honesty. Brutal, uncomfortable, undeniable honesty. About what you've outgrown, what you're avoiding, what you actually want, and what you're pretending not to see. Because the moment you become honest, something shifts. The fear doesn't disappear, but it loses its control. And suddenly, you're not stuck anymore. You're just choosing. And that's power. Not the loud kind, not the flashy kind, the quiet kind. The kind where you look at your life and say, I'm not going back, even if you don't know exactly where you're going yet. And if you've made it this far, I need to tell you something important. This tension you feel today, this internal war, this pressure, it's not here to destroy you. It's here to introduce you to the version of yourself that no longer asks for permission. And once you meet that version, even for a moment, everything changes. Now listen carefully, because this is the part most people never reach. Up until now, everything you've been feeling, the confusion, the pressure, the internal conflict, it's been building towards something. Not endlessly, not randomly, toward a breaking point. And today, you're standing right on the edge of it. But here's what nobody tells you about breaking points. They don't feel like explosions. They feel like clarity. A quiet, undeniable realization that settles into your chest and refuses to leave. A moment where you suddenly see your life, without the filters, without the excuses, without the stories you've been telling yourself to stay comfortable. And when that moment hits, you have two choices. You either step into the truth or retreat back into illusion. Most people retreat, not because they're weak, but because truth requires change. And change requires loss of identity, loss of control, loss of the version of yourself that once made sense. And that's where Pluto tightens its grip, because Pluto doesn't just represent power, it represents attachment to power, the structures, the roles, the patterns that once gave you control over your life, even if those same structures are now suffocating you. Think about it. What are you still holding on to that you already know is no longer aligned with who you're becoming? Is it a mindset, a relationship, a version of yourself that feels familiar but heavy? You don't have to answer out loud, but you already know. Because Pluto doesn't hide things, it buries them. And today, those buried things are rising. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the moment you become aware of what needs to change, you also become aware of what it will cost you. And that's the moment fear speaks the loudest. Not as panic, not as chaos, but as logic. It sounds reasonable, convincing, almost protective. Maybe now isn't the right time. Maybe you should wait. Maybe you're overreacting. But let me tell you something that might change the way you see this forever. That voice is not trying to protect your future. It's trying to preserve your past. And the past has no idea who you're becoming. That's why this feels so disorienting. Because you're standing between two realities, one that feels familiar but limiting, and one that feels uncertain but expansive. And your mind is trying to choose safety. But your soul is pulling you forward. That tension you feel, that's the gap between those two worlds. And here's the truth that changes everything. You don't cross that gap by thinking your way through it. You cross it by becoming someone new. Not gradually, not someday. In moments like this, transformation is not a process, it's a decision. A decision that happens internally, before it ever shows up externally. And I know what you're thinking. If I let go, what happens next? If I change, will everything fall apart? If I step into this new version of myself, will I lose everything I've built? And the answer is yes, but not in the way you think. You won't lose everything. You'll lose everything that can't come with you. And that's exactly what makes this moment so powerful. Because this isn't about destruction, it's about refinement. Pluto doesn't destroy randomly. It removes what is false, what is outdated, what is no longer in alignment with your evolution. And Aries? Aries doesn't wait for permission. So when these two forces collide, you get a very specific kind of energy. The kind that forces you to stop hesitating. The kind that makes indecision unbearable. The kind that pushes you to finally say, enough. Not dramatically, not emotionally, but with a quiet certainty that comes from deep within. And when you reach that point, something shifts. You stop negotiating with your fear. You stop asking for validation. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, because you realize something most people never do. There is no perfect moment. There is only the moment you decide. And for you, that moment is now. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because this shift, this internal decision, it doesn't always look like action right away. Sometimes, it looks like stillness, a pause, a step back, a moment where you stop reacting and start observing. Because for the first time, you're not being controlled by your old patterns. You're watching them. And that changes everything. You start noticing things you didn't see before. How certain situations drain you. How certain people limit you. How certain thoughts keep repeating, even though they no longer serve you. And instead of automatically responding, you hesitate, not out of fear, but out of awareness. And in that hesitation, you create space. Space to choose differently. Space to respond instead of react. Space to become intentional instead of automatic. And that's where real transformation begins. Not in big dramatic actions, but in small conscious shifts. The moment you Say no when you used to say yes. Walk away when you used to stay. Speak up when you used to stay silent. Trust yourself when you used to doubt. These moments seem small, but they are everything, because they are proof that you are no longer who you used to be. And once that shift begins, it doesn't stop, because the version of you that's emerging right now is not temporary. This isn't motivation. This isn't inspiration. This is identity evolution. An identity, once it changes, restructures everything. Your decisions, your habits, your standards, your boundaries, even the way people respond to you. Because the world doesn't respond to who you say you are. It responds to who you embody. And today, you're starting to embody something new, something stronger, something clearer, something more aligned. And yes, it feels unfamiliar, because growth always does. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. It means you're expanding beyond your past. And if you've been feeling like things are shifting around you lately, like certain dynamics are changing, like certain people are acting differently, like certain opportunities are appearing or disappearing, that's not coincidence. That's alignment. Your internal shift is starting to affect your external reality. And this is just the beginning. Because what you're stepping into right now is not just a new version of yourself, it's a new standard. A standard that says, I no longer tolerate what diminishes me, I no longer chase what doesn't choose me, I no longer stay where I've outgrown. And once you live from that standard, everything changes. But we're not done yet. Because there's one final piece to this, one final shift that most people never make. And it's the difference between temporary change and permanent transformation. In the next part, I'll show you exactly what that is, and why the next 48 hours will determine the next phase of your life. Stay with me.